Hi, I'm Angie O'Gorman and I work for Dover Specialist Teaching and Learning Service. And today I'm going to do a short presentation for you on executive functioning. I'm just going to share my screen for you. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about executive functioning difficulties. And these difficulties sometimes occur with children with autism or children with ADHD, or these difficulties might occur in their own right. You might have children with memory issues or children with slower processing, etc. So the strategies I'm going to talk to you about today can be used with all those groups of children. So the aims of today's training are to understand the 4 key executive functions of inhibitory control, cognitive flexibility, working memory and planning. And we're going to learn some strategies to support pupils with poor executive functions, that's difficulties in those 4 areas. Just to say right from the beginning, it's important when we're doing any training with children with special needs to think about the issues from their points of view, and particularly with executive functioning. Lots of these children in the past have been sort of labelled sort of a bit lazy, or they're not paying attention because people haven't realised the difficulties that they've got. So it's just a quote here. It says, "Try to be positive and boost my self-esteem. Understand I may make mistakes because I have poor executive functions and not because I'm lazy, careless, or not paying attention." If we can get that right and boost these children's self-esteem and ensure that they have a good cycle of success, then they're going to keep achieving because they're going to get more confident and they're going to be able to ask questions instead of remaining quiet, and they're just going to go on achieving. So that's really important. Okay, so what are executive functions? I've already mentioned the sort of 4 areas that I'm going to focus on today. But in the past and still now, there is huge debate over what executive functions really includes. And certainly in the area of autism, there's a theory that some of autism can be explained by executive dysfunctioning. And within that, there are so many different studies studying different parts of executive functioning. It gets really confusing. So these are just some of the models that are out there, all including different things, all sort of drawn out differently. But as I said, the ones I've chosen to look at today are ones where there's lots of research on, and I think really explain the different elements really well. I mean, if the labels aren't perfect, it doesn't matter really, as long as we're getting the strategies right to support our students. Okay, so what are executive functions? Executive functions are a very specific set of cognitive skills that are responsible for regulating and managing a range of other subordinate cognitive functions. The reason we call them executive functions is because, just like a chief executive officer in the highest ranking company kind of controls everything, that's exactly what the executive functions in the brain are doing. There are 4 key executive functions, and these are inhibitory control, cognitive flexibility, working memory and planning. And as I said, there is a bit of debate there as to the key ones, but these are the ones that I'm going to focus on today. Okay, so inhibitory control. So I'm sure everyone who I'm talking to today has come across children in the classroom that impulsively just shout out the answer, and other children seem to be able to sort of sit there and then put their hand up when they're asked to do so. So inhibitory control is really all about that. It's about being able to suppress automatic behaviour, thoughts and emotions, and being able to exercise that discipline. Another example might be, for example, that you smell a lovely cake cooking in the kitchen, and you, as soon as it's cooked, you instantly want to go and eat it or have a slice. Whereas another person might think, right, I've already had my lunch, so I'll have that for pudding tonight, exercising that control. So inhibitory control is involved in that sort of instant reaction and also almost pre-planning. For example, you your friends might be going out for a drink later on in the evening, but you make a conscious decision that actually, no, I'm not going to go. I've got an exam tomorrow. I'm going to revise my exam tomorrow because that's the greater long-term goal. So it is about that exercising of discipline and suppressing that automatic behaviour. And children with poor inhibitory control, they are the ones that will shout out in class, that will go and grab and eat that cake, that will do things without thinking. And we've got to, you know, bear that in mind. And as I said at the beginning, not to lower their self-esteem, but find strategies to help them. For example, maybe a visual cue on the board that, you know, when a child blurts out the answer, you can just point to it and say, oh, hands up, just to remind them. So that's inhibitory control. Then we've got cognitive flexibility. Now, this is the ability to adapt behaviour and thoughts to changing or unexpected events. It helps us, being cognitively flexible, helps us to learn new ways of doing things, helps us to switch between activities. And children with difficulties in this area often really don't like change. They find it really hard to transition and move on between activities. Often they have learned a way to do something and they like to stick to that way. They find it very hard to learn new ways. And the example we've got here, we've got a boy there counting on his fingers because that's the way he's first learned to do something. And then we've got perhaps someone working something out in their head and also noting calculations down. So this area can really hold children back because they don't learn the faster ways of doing things. So it's all about encouraging them and helping them move on gradually and preparing them for change. And we'll come to some more strategies a bit later on. So working memory. Working memory is just a limited capacity store. So it's a limited capacity store for retaining information for a brief period while performing mental operations on that information. So that's that information you need in there at the time you're doing something. So you can imagine if you've got difficulties in retaining that information, you're constantly losing and having to go back and check and getting lost in the lesson. So it must be really difficult for these children. If you think about maths problems, for example, linking to cognitive flexibility that we just talked about, a lot of children do, who struggle in this area, do keep those old strategies going, like counting on the fingers, because they can't physically hold information in their head. So, for example, some maybe like 9 plus 7, for example. Someone with a good working memory might work that out as, oh, 9 plus 1 equals 10, and then 10 plus the remaining 6 equals 16. But someone with poor working memory is really going to struggle with that, because as soon as they've done 9 plus 1, they might have then forgotten what the original sum is. So we need to help these children perhaps by getting them to note things down, giving them visuals to support them, and being there to basically relay the information back to them. Like I said, I'll come to more strategies a bit later on, but it's just to give you some idea of the difficulties that they have. Another example is in note taking. A child with a good working memory might go ahead and write the notes as the teacher is talking. A child with poor working memory is constantly forgetting what's been said, but not only that, is trying to remember how to spell things, how to link information, and so they're getting very, very overwhelmed. So we need to think about strategies to help them, maybe having information written down for them through sort of structured writing frames to help them so they don't have to take as much down, visual cues again, all that kind of thing. But yeah, so can you imagine that having that difficulty with working memory is really going to hold you back and really going to affect your self-esteem as well, because you might well be having to constantly ask, oh, what did you say, miss? What was that? And if you're not always getting a positive response from the teacher, if you're getting like, oh, really? Do I have to repeat this again? Then you're going to have a really low self-esteem and not the confidence to ask questions. So it's really important we respond positively to these children. The other area there is planning. We can see from these two pictures, two very different types of plan. We've got a highly complex plan there up on the right. On the left, we've got poor planning, where a child's just about to saw himself off the tree. So planning is being able to think ahead or mentally anticipate the right way to do something. And involved in that is identifying goals, prioritising, sequencing, evaluating, so that you can then go and adapt your plans. And children with difficulties in these areas will really struggle as they go up through the school, particularly as they get to secondary, where they're supposed to take more responsibility for their learning, where they have to do more longer essays, where they have to write a plan for. So as you go up through education, these difficulties will become more apparent and more difficult for them. So it's really important that we get in early and give these children strategies to help them. Classic examples are planning essays. So these children might just jump in and start writing without doing that plan. Organising revision. The children might not think to match the exam timetable to what they're revising and get that planning and organisation in place. So it can really cause difficulties. And again, we'll talk about some strategies later on, but I just want you to think what it would be like to have these difficulties. So, and without things in place, these children are really going to struggle academically and with their well-being, because they're going to think they're no good at anything. Okay, so as I said, we're going to come on to talking about supporting children with poor executive functions. And I've broken this down into thinking about the environment, and then thinking about things we can do before the activity and during the activity, and the importance of giving that praise after the activity. So in terms of the environment, because these children struggle to remember, struggle to plan, very impulsive, they're constantly affected by things going on around them. And so we've got to help them with that mental discipline, basically, and put things in place and structure in place to reduce the amount of overload. So a structured, distraction-free environment is perfect. Things like routines. If a child's got a set routine, then they haven't got to worry about remembering that. It becomes instilled in them. Things like visual schedules, timetables and work systems. If they know how the day's going to pan out, if they know what's expected for them to do, if it's there in front of them, then they haven't got to worry about constantly thinking about it or worrying about it. Reducing distractions. Think about where you seat the child, and I've got at the bottom there, make sure that the seating plan, if possible, is consistent, because if the child's going to come into every single lesson thinking, oh, where do I sit today, that is already a worry and a disorganisation that they don't need. So by reducing distractions, think about displays, think about, should this child be sitting next to a noisy corridor, Is it good to sit this child next to a window where there's lots going on outside? Within that environment, think about the sensory challenges. Like I've said, a lot of these children present with other conditions such as ADHD and autism, and children with autism have lots of sensory challenges. So do think about that. What's the noise level like? Is it really hot in the room? Are they going to get distracted by that? If they're thinking about how hot they are, then they're not going to be thinking about their work. Is there a terrible smell in the room? Just have a think about that. Get to know your child. What are their challenges? And then you can help them by reducing the challenges in the environment. Moving on to preparing them before an activity. So this is crucial. The preparation that goes involved before the activity will determine how that activity goes. So remember that these children have a lower working memory capacity. So don't give long, laborious instructions. Give short, clear, minimal language instructions. If you do have to give several instructions, make sure they're written down so that the child can refer back to them, or that the child's got some visual prompts for those instructions. So prepare checklists. A task planner is a brilliant idea of each section broken down so the child knows exactly where they're going, or an outline plan for those secondary children, a plan of activities that they can just tick off as they've done each one. Balance the demands on the student in relation to what you want them to learn. That's crucial. Does the student, for example, really need to know the learning objectives off by heart? Okay. Have they got to sit there copying it down, looking up at the board, looking down, trying to write it, forgetting where they were? Could that learning objective be printed out and stuck in their book? Or if they're a secondary student, could that child have a sheet of paper at the beginning with the learning objective and some key reminders written down on, and given that piece of paper to work from? I was once in a secondary lesson where the lesson went wrong right from the start. I was sitting working with the pupil. The learning objective went up on the board. It was really long. He started to write it down. He constantly looking up and down, losing his place. He then ran out of time. The teacher had moved on to the next slide. He was still in the middle of writing the objective down. He got in a state that he hadn't finished writing it. He couldn't then work, he couldn't think straight, the slides were moving on, he was getting more and more behind in his lesson. Okay, so just something to think about. Does that child really need to write that learning objective down? Can it be stuck in their book? Can the title be stuck in their book? Can we have a more like a structured writing frame stuck in their book with the title on it and some of the key headings? Another thing is give children choices when assigning activities. Lots of these children, because of their other activities, other difficulties as well, such as ADHD and autism, will have problems with anxiety as well. And we don't want to increase their anxiety with the task as well. So a good way is to give them a little bit of control, because by giving control, you're reducing anxiety. So it may be you say to the child, right, these are the things that are on offer to do today. I'd like you to choose one of them. Or we need to do X, Y, and Z. Which one are you going to do first? Okay, moving on to during activity, how you can help these children. So monitor the children as they do the activity. Do you need to go over there? Do you need to give extra verbal or visual prompts? Okay, check in on them, check they're okay. If you've divided an activity into different segments, then a really useful strategy might be to give your expectations or rules for the first segment, then go over and re-explain the second section so everything's clear and ready to go again. Please bear in mind as well that because these children have problems with memory and planning and inhibiting their control and everything else. They're really getting tired. They're having to work twice as hard as anyone else. Okay, so it may be that they might need a break at the end of a particular section, just to stop, calm themselves, gather their thoughts. Or it may be that they need extra time for an activity, and that's okay. A lot of these children are struggling academically, and of course this can lead to low self-esteem. So it's really important that you provide constant positive feedback during the activity when they do things well. And if I take you back to that slide at the beginning, remembering not to say things like, oh, that's careless, or oh, have I got to answer that question again? Have you not been listening? Okay, if a child has difficulty with executive functions, they're going to need to hear information again. And they should feel okay about asking. That's the right thing to do. We want to encourage them to ask questions, to give that positive feedback. Find a balance. It's important to give just enough support to help the child to be successful, but also to help them to be independent. Okay, being overbearing and providing too much support can, yes, they'll get on okay with the task, but then they develop no independence. So you want to get this balance right so that the child feels like they've achieved something, that they're independent, but they also feel supported. Just some key pointers here. This links back, the first one links back to where I've said get to know your child. Don't assume that all children have the same difficulties in this area. Just because you know the child's got difficulties with executive functions, don't assume that a particular strategy is going to work for them. Get to know what works for them. It may be that a particular child needs to be sitting on their own to totally focus. It may be that another child can cope with sitting next to someone and actually benefits from sitting near a more able peer that might dip in and out and help them. So get to know your children. And just remembering that a lot of the strategies that I've talked about today are good quality first teaching, and often they will benefit all the children. Okay, so think about that. It shouldn't be huge amounts of extra work. Okay, can you put someone in a group where lots of children need these strategies and you can pop over and help the group? And just remembering that self-esteem link as well. A good cycle of success is going to boost confidence. Okay, so if you're really open to these children, supporting them and making them feel comfortable when they're asking for help, then they're going to feel good about themselves. They're going to feel like they're learning, and their confidence is going to boost and going to learn these strategies and keep them going throughout secondary. And hopefully introducing strategies early on will support these children, as I've said, to carry on through secondary, but also into adulthood and beyond. Okay, so I'm just going to take you back to that slide about seeing the problem through the eyes of the child. Okay, it's so important that we don't come back with negativity all the time. Oh, I've got to say that again. Okay, it's really important. Try to boost self-esteem, give lots of praise, make the child want to learn, feel comfortable in learning, and to learn these strategies so that they can keep going with it. And if we can do that, then they're going to be successful in primary, secondary, and I said before, and beyond. Just some contact details there. Obviously, it's me you've listened to today, Angie O'Gorman, and I'm the specialist teacher for communication and interaction. But also Julia Cox, our specialist teacher for cognition and learning, gives lots of support to children with executive functioning difficulties and can help in this area with she's got good ideas on memory difficulties in particular to help. So hopefully there's a bit to be going on with there to help you with those executive functioning difficulties. And yeah, just remembering a lot of it is quality first teaching, and yeah, good luck with it.